Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Unstressed Exec. I am Dr. George Vergolias, executive and resilience coach, forensic psychologist, and your guide for this series on separation and divorce. Today is episode number 13, and it is part 3 of a 4-part series, The Beginner's Guide to Navigating Separation and Divorce. If you've made it this far, you've already done some incredibly brave and difficult work. In episode 11, I talked about recognizing when it's time to let go. Then in episode 12, as a follow-up, we discussed how to separate with grace and not chaos. Today, we will focus on the chapter that often gets skipped or often rushed over. I see this a lot in the executive resilience and life coaching that I do, particularly with men that are going through separation and divorce. And what is skipped over often is the sense of rebuilding your self-identity, your self-worth, and moving towards emotional recovery. Remember that separation isn't just about ending a relationship. It's about rediscovering and redefining who you are without that relationship. So let's begin. First, it's important that we talk about the identity vacuum. And let me explain what that means. One of the most disorienting parts of divorce isn't losing the other person. It's losing the version of yourself that existed and that came into being within that relationship. And there's a number of questions that come up through that process, such as, who am I now? What do I actually like? What do I believe about love, commitment, trust? Was I ever truly myself in that relationship? I hear that one a lot in the people that I coach, particularly men. Psychologists call this phase the identity vacuum. It is a time where you have to shed the skin, the identity you were wearing before, but you haven't fully formed into a new identity yet because you're developing it and you're learning and you're growing. In many ways, it's like a caterpillar who's gone into the cocoon. Once you're in the cocoon, you are no longer that caterpillar. You're also not yet the butterfly. You're somewhere in between growing and developing and metamorphosizing into something new. That is a normal process, but it is uncomfortable and it's going to bring up some uncomfortable emotions. And it's where the real building begins. The other thing I think we want to talk about is why healing is not linear. Most of us, and I hear this all the time, again, in the coaching that I do and the consulting that I do with companies. It's this sense that growth is a linear process. One day should be better than the next. And one of the reasons we get that is we look at social media and we see influencers. And every day we see them getting better. Every week, every month, they get more influence. They have more followers. They're doing better. They're losing more weight. They're looking more ripped, whatever the growth process that they're on. What we're not seeing are the B-sides. We're not seeing the B-reel. We're not seeing the blooper reel. We're not seeing behind the scenes. All we're seeing is their highlight reel. And in addition to the natural tendency for people to think that growth should be linear, every day is better or more growth than the last, it is doubly reinforced now by social media. But we need to break that myth because healing doesn't happen in perfect upward spirals. This is what healing looks like. 1 week of clarity, followed by a day of grief or mourning, then a burst of motivation, followed by confusion or anger. And each of those can last hours or days or even weeks. And when you feel that you're not growing, when you feel that grief, that mourning, that confusion, that anger, that irritability, that disconnect, that numbness, that's not backsliding. That is the process of healing in motion. How many of you do physical exercise, particularly weight training of some kind? Whether bodybuilding or powerlifting or whatever. When you have a particularly difficult or challenging or heavy workout, or maybe you took time off and you just started working out again, how do you feel that next day or the next 2 days? You feel sore. You're tired. You feel limited mobility. You might even have headaches or other back pain or other types of muscle pain that wasn't even in the targeted muscle group that you worked on. That is the process of your muscles healing. For your muscles to grow, we have to stretch and essentially rip them, and then they grow back stronger and tougher each time. That is very similar to the emotional process of healing. It is not linear. So emotions don't expire on a schedule, right? Often I hear a lot of this from men and women, but a lot of the men I work with that'll say, listen, it's been 6 months. Why aren't I over this? Why do I still have occasional bad days? Because again, emotions don't expire on a schedule. It takes time. And trying to force closure too soon will only delay your growth. And here's the key truth when it comes to that process of healing: you don't need to be over it to begin becoming who you are meant to be. The process of continuing to feel it and be present with the feeling, but being able to hold it and work through it, that actually is the process of going through it. So it's important to realize that you don't have to be over it in order to reach that next stage. You are in that process. So the third area I want to talk about is rebuilding a new sense of identity and self-worth after loss or betrayal. So whether the relationship ended mutually, unexpectedly, through betrayal, your self-worth can take a hit regardless of the material reasons why it came to an end. Here's how to begin restoring that. And I've got 4 things to consider here. Number 1, rewrite the narrative. And what I mean by that is every day there's a song, I think by Natasha Bedingfield. I think that's her name. And I think it's called Unwritten. And she just talks about how every day is a new day to rewrite your story. When you are navigating through loss or betrayal after a separation or divorce, rewriting the narrative is critical. So instead of thinking I failed, reframe that with I chose growth over stagnation. I chose happiness over feeling miserable. I chose giving my kids the hope of modeling a healthy adult or even marital relationship over showing them what an unhappy, stagnant relationship is. That's an important reframe because one of the biggest things I see in the work that I do is the sense that people think they failed. There's so much heavy societal bullshit and burden put on marriages that don't work out. Whether it's a promise to God or it's a promise to the other person, or what are the kids going to think, or is it going to hurt the kids? And then you have in-laws, and then you have all of your couple friends who their identity is built around, as a friend, the identity that you two were a couple. Now you're no longer a couple. So who sees those couple friends, right? Inevitably, many of those couple friends are going to drift away. Some of them just because there aren't the shared interests anymore. And for some of them, honestly, some of those married friends are miserable themselves. And by witnessing that you have had the strength and courage to leave in the hope of finding peace and happiness, it hits a strong nerve for them because it's what they're thinking of at 3 a.m, but they don't want to admit, or they don't, or have not found the courage yet to act on it. So there's a lot of reasons why that can happen, but you have the ability to rewrite the narrative. Another example of that is instead of saying I wasn't enough, reframe that to I wanted a deeper connection, and that's not a flaw. Or I wanted authenticity, or I wanted loyalty, and those are not flaws. So in the case of betrayal, where someone cheated on you, it's easy to say I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough for them, and that's why they stepped out. That's certainly a thought. And there is a moment in the learning curve to ask yourself, what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? But frame that in terms of next time. If you know it's over, what can I do different next time when I find connection again or when I find love? What can I learn from that experience and take it forward? But don't leave it at I wasn't enough, because there's nothing to do with that. You can't build on that. When you say I wanted a deeper connection and that's not a flaw, Now you could go into, what does it mean to have a deeper connection? What does it mean to have an authentic, genuine, loving relationship? And how do I start building that in my life? And how do I identify my wants, my needs, and my non negotiables? The other thing I would think about under rewriting the narrative, and this is the first recommendation I give to people when they call me and they're struggling with loss, betrayal after separation or divorce. And that is change your behavioral cues that are around you. Now, your resources, your financial resources are going to dictate how crazy you can go with this one. But it could be something as small as in your bedroom or living room, change the artwork. Go to Kirkland's, go to Target, go to Walmart, Kohl's, buy some new prints at a fairly reasonable cost and put up new artwork in your home. Now, much of that artwork, you barely even notice it because it sits there. It's been sitting there for years. And if someone came over and said, "Oh, you got this picture on the wall," you might say, "Oh, yeah, I rarely look at it anymore," because it's just part of the furniture. It's just part of the background. That's understandable. But that background is associated with her or him, your ex, being in the picture, right? It's associated with the laughter and the joys and the tears and the ups and the downs and the celebrations. So I often tell people change the artwork in your house, rearrange the furniture. If you can go buy new furniture, absolutely go buy new furniture, especially if you're due for a new couch or due for a new coffee table. But if you can't, no worries, rearrange the furniture. Set the environment into something new because you are forming a new identity and you want to shed yourself of all the behavioral cues that reminded you of when that person was intricately in your life. It's one of the more powerful things you can do, and you can do it pretty easily. The other one that's pretty cheap is paint. Paint the room a different color. Paint your bedroom, paint your living room, paint your kitchen a different color. A couple gallons of paint doesn't cost much and it just takes a weekend. Again, changing the behavioral cues around you can be very, very profound and very powerful. What's another thing to consider when you're rebuilding that new identity and your self worth? Separate your worth from the outcome. Your worth is not only a reflection of whatever the intended outcome is. When you think of entrepreneurs, think of Henry Ford. Henry Ford failed at multiple businesses before he broke through. Tesla, Edison, all of these inventors failed multiple times before they broke through. Yet they had the self-worth to keep going and believe in themselves. You are not your marriage. You are not your divorce. You are a collection of experiences and feelings and wants and needs and desires and gifts to bring to the world. You are not the outcome. And yes, I think it's good at one point to look in the mirror and say, what can I learn from this? That is a good growth mindset, right? You take the feedback serious, but not personal. What that means is you take the feedback. What could I learn from this and grow into my next relationship? But I'm not going to take it personal as I suck or I'm bad or I have bad character or I'm unlovable or I'm not worthy. So separate the words from the outcome. Third, watch for shame spirals. These are going to happen. It's just part of the process. Guilt says I made a mistake. Shame says I am a mistake. Guilt says I did something bad or wrong. Guilt says I am bad or I am wrong. Make sure you stay out of shame. And when you start feeling I am bad, I am wrong, I am the mistake, you have to question that. You have to question that. There's a reason that the relationship lasted as long as it did. Something at some level, in some way, was working. There was a value that you provided. Maybe it was never really respected or appreciated. Maybe you did make a mistake in a moment of weakness, and maybe that led to the loss of the marriage or relationship. But those are mistakes that you made that you can learn from and grow. It is not an indication that you're a piece of shit. I literally hear that a lot, especially from men, thinking that they're a piece of shit. You're not. So again, watch out for those shame spirals. Call out shame when it shows up. Speak to it directly and then replace it with curiosity and compassion. And then the fourth thing under rebuilding that new identity is affirm yourself daily. Now, I know this sounds cheesy. I know this sounds really like kitschy. It sounds very Oprah like, but this is powerful. The words that we say to ourselves and about ourselves have a direct relation and the neural links that our brain makes. And those neural links have a direct relation to the feelings we feel about ourselves. And when we feel good about ourselves, guess what? Holy shit, we're more motivated to do interesting, cool things that promote growth. When we feel shitty about ourselves, we're way more likely to eat a carton of ice cream and then feel guilty and sit on the couch and do nothing. So speak well about yourself. Write down 3 wins each day. Here's a technique. Write down 3 wins each day: emotional, behavioral, and mental. What's an emotional win? Maybe you reframed an emotion that came to you. Maybe you had a feeling of I failed and you caught it and reframed it. That's an emotional win. Behavioral. Maybe you changed a pattern. Maybe you rearranged the furniture. You bought new artwork. Maybe it was something as simple as you were able to go into that old coffee house that you used to go into with your wife and you managed the feelings. You didn't lose it. You didn't break down. Mental fortitude, mental strength, right? Write down some wins so you can celebrate those at the end of the day. Even if it's something as simple as I got out of bed and I made coffee. For some of us, we know what it's like in the early stages. And for some of us in the middle stages or longer stages to feel like we just don't want to get out of bed. We just want to crawl into the fetal position, right? And let the covers wash over us. So affirm yourself daily. I give myself a high five in the mirror every morning when I'm brushing my teeth. That's a technique that Mel Robbins talks about in her book and on her podcast. And I try to catch every time I say negative things about myself. So from there, I think it's important we talk about after you are working on establishing a new identity, developing that self-worth again, there's a process that comes with that, which is rediscovering your desires, goals, and joy. And this is going to be partly a rediscovering and partly a new discovering, because you're going to rediscover things that you lost in the course of that relationship that has now ended. You gave these up. You gave up these desires. You gave up these goals. You gave up these dreams, but you're also not the same person that you were when you started that relationship, whether it was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. For me, it was 17 years. 17 years I was in my marriage. So a part of this is also newly discovering new things that you're interested in and that you like. In many ways, divorce can be a reset. It's a painful one, sure, but it is a reset. And it's also a chance to reconnect with parts of yourself that were dormant for a long time. So within that kind of umbrella, ask yourself the following questions. What did I use to love doing before this relationship? What parts of myself did I suppress to make things work? What lights me up now, even in small ways? I love that question. And you don't have to eat the elephant all at once here. You can start small. Try a new hobby. Travel alone. Reconnect with old friends who you've not talked to or seen in years. Redecorate your space to reflect you, which is, again, partly reflecting your new identity here. It's also redoing the behavioral cues that I mentioned in the last section, right? And I understand we think of starting over, but I like to reframe that. Starting over sounds so fucking huge. It sounds like such a lift. So what I like to do is think that you're not starting over, you're starting from experience. You're writing a new chapter. It is not a blank slate. You're writing a new chapter that is born of and influenced by experience that you've developed over the years and experience you've developed from the relationship you just came out of. That's powerful. Now you're armed with learnings and insights and lessons that you can take forward and continue to grow. And hopefully, if you want to, engage in the kind of relationship that you were hoping for. The other thing to think about is, how do you grieve what never was? That's how I frame this. And again, this is something I see all the time with my coaching clients. How do you grieve a sense of what never really was there to begin with in the relationship? It reminds me of the Doobie Brothers song, What a Fool Believes. And there's a line in there where he basically says, as Michael McDonald is singing, he's basically talking about how the guy is longing for a connection that never existed. There is a feeling that despite being married for 5, 10, 15, 17 years, in many ways, my spouse never got me. My girlfriend, my boyfriend, my partner, they never really got me. So we're grieving for a time that never really existed. One of the hardest truths to accept after divorce is grieving the potential that you believed in. You're not just mourning the relationship that ended, you're actually grieving. And you're grieving a number of things. It's important to name these. You're grieving the future you planned together, the version of your partner that you hoped that they would have become, the family story you told yourself, and the identity that you built around this concept of us. With that, you have to give yourself permission to cry over those things, be angry that they didn't happen, or they never manifested or came to fruition, and permission to feel disappointed without self-blame. You could be upset and feel disappointed that those things never happened without blaming yourself. This is a valid type of grief, and it deserves time and it deserves space to express. So, another step you're likely going to experience in this development of a new identity, a new self-worth, a new you, is this question of when and how to rebuild intimacy. I do lives on TikTok and YouTube sometimes. I get a lot of messages in my DMs and again in my coaching practice. And one of the biggest questions I get out of the gate, how long do I have to wait before dating? How long should I wait before I fall in love? I'm dating someone and I really like them. How long do I wait to tell the person I love them? And it really comes down to this curiosity of when will I be ready to date again or love again? And here's the short answer. When your peace matters more than being partnered. Let me say that again. It's when your peace matters more than being partnered. What drives me freaking nuts is I see divorce or separation or even dating coaches online, typically on TikTok or Instagram, Facebook, and so on. And maybe they're doing lives and they're taking questions and they've got good insights. They've been through the process. They've done the work. But then someone asks, how long do I have to wait? And inevitably these coaches, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, oh, you have to wait at least a year. You have to wait at least 6 months. You have to wait at least 3 months. And I understand that type of guideline. I do. I get it, right? But I'm sorry, it's utter fucking bullshit. It's utter bullshit. Because the reality is number one, you don't know when the universe is going to bring love your way. And the universe is a funny motherfucker. And they might bring love your way 2 months after you've separated or 3 months. You don't know when they're going to put in front of you that new person. The question is not the arbitrary external timeline. The question is, when are you ready? When your peace matters more than being together with somebody, more than being partnered. That is the key determinant. And to get there, you have had to have done the work. Now, why do I say those timelines are arbitrary and bullshit? It's because I've coached people that go through separation and 6 months after separation, they still haven't even begun doing the hard work. I've also coached people that have been miserable for years and they started doing the work 2 years before they ever got separated. They started doing the hard work and that work got them to a place where they finally acknowledged, I'm done. I'm done here. I'm done giving and not getting back. I'm done sacrificing and not feeling any reciprocity, not feeling respected, not feeling loved, not feeling supported. So that person might be ready very soon after the separation because they've been doing the work all along. And it's like a grieving process. Think about grief itself. And I mean actual grief when you lose somebody. There are people that don't start grieving till the person is dead. There's other people that don't start grieving for months or even a year after the person dies. But there are times that people are grieving well before the person dies. I think about 22 when my father died of cancer. I'd like to say I was a young man. I wasn't. I was still an old teenager. I was in grad school. I was ambitious, but emotionally, I was not a man. And I did not have the benefit of knowing him in a way that I would say was man to man. He had cancer. He withered away for at least 18 months. I was grieving his loss for an entire 18 months before he died. So by the time he died, there still was grief. There still was a level of pain that came with the finality. But I did a lot of work leading into that in therapy, in coaching, in journaling. So my grieving process actually predated the event. Just like that, there are people that will do the work before the separation. So this notion of you got to be on your own for 3 months or 6 months, no, it's when you're ready and only you will know that. But the barometer that I like to look at is when your peace matters more than being partnered. And here are some signs that you're moving towards that readiness, right? One, you're not obsessed with your ex's choices. Think about that for a minute. When you were in high school, and whether it was you or maybe a friend of yours had a breakup, when did you know that you or your friend was over their ex? And one of the reasons you know that is when you're out and someone comes up and says, "Hey, did you know your ex is dating so and so?" And you just don't give a shit. You might even be like, "You know what? Good for them. I'm happy for them. I hope it works out." That's when you know you're over them. You're not obsessed with their choices. You've moved on emotionally. Number two, you're curious about others without urgency or pressure. You're not just trying to partner up out of filling some void or gap. The reason you're not doing that is because you've already filled the void and gap with your sense of peace, with your goals, with your new interests, with your desire. You have refallen in love with yourself. And so there isn't an urgency or a pressure to go find someone else to give you that validation. The third sign that you might be ready is you're not looking to fix your pain through someone else. You've done the work. You may still have the pain, but you're carrying it and you're carrying it pretty damn well. So you're not obsessed with your ex's choices. You're curious about others without urgency or pressure, and you're not looking to fix your pain through someone else. Remember that rebuilding intimacy starts within. You have to feel safe inside your own body, thoughts, and emotions before inviting someone else into that space. And here's the flip. If you don't do the work, if you blow it off, if you think what I'm saying right now is bullshit and you can do a shortcut, you're going to carry all those crappy patterns into that next relationship and then into the next one and then the next one. You can't cheat on this. This is something you have to do the work in order to get there. So take your time because real love honors real healing. So let me then talk about some tactical and practical tools for emotional recovery. First is inner child work. And again, this one sounds kitschy. It sounds Oprah-like, but it can be powerful. Acknowledging that part of you that feels scared, abandoned, or unworthy. Speak to that part with compassion. I often don't love the inner child metaphor because I think sometimes people identify too much with it and they go back philosophically, if you will, to an age that absolves accountability and responsibility. I like to think of it as a man. What are those inner parts of my malehood that still need to grow and that are more vulnerable? So again, things like I'm scared. I feel abandoned. I feel unworthy. I feel a lack of confidence. I start working on that. And do it with compassion. Give yourself some grace. You're growing, you're learning, you're human, right? Then there's somatic practices. Somatic meaning soma, meaning body. There's body practices. Things like breath work. And there's so many different things out there, right? There's the physiological sigh, there's deep breath work. There's a number of things you can do just to center and focus on your breathing and be focused on your body. And it helps you be present in the moment and feeling the feelings that are going through you. Yoga is a mix of that. It helps with all of what I just said, but it also has a physicality to it. And for someone like me who has close to zero flexibility, it also is good just for stretching. Trauma-informed body movement is another example. I think there are coaches that do this. I am a fan that if you're going to do this with coaches, you want a clinically informed coach, somebody like me, somebody who is a trained clinician who also does coaching, or just seek out therapy for trauma-informed body movement. But this is where you're linking various bodily exercises and movement exercises with trauma work, reflecting on emotions and reflecting on your thoughts and cognitions around traumatic experiences that happened to you. The third category is journaling prompts. Now, I don't like to write. My writing is atrocious. I can barely read my writing right after I write it. So I like to dialogue my journal out. I actually talk it out as if I'm having a conversation, but there are a number of prompts. I'm just going to give you three here. I feel most like myself when fill in the blank. Number two, what I need now from others is fill in the blank. Or what I need now in a relationship is fill in the blank. It might be I need space. I need acceptance. I need patience. I need peace, or I need calm if you're coming out of a volatile relationship, right? Here's a third one. I used to believe blank, but now I know blank. So here you're tying experiences to what insights have you grown out of that? You're tying, there's some bad things that may have happened to me or bad experiences I had, but this is what I've learned from it. And notice what you're not doing. You're not turning it into a toxic repeating cycle. I came out of a shitty environment, so now I'm going to be jaded and pissed off at the world. So many of the men, and especially the women that I coach that are navigating post-divorce, but now in the dating pool, the jadedness is there, but it's understandable. So I'm going to say it's understandable. They've been through difficult experiences. They've been ghosted. They've been lied to by men who've showed up and are nothing like their profile. I could go down the road, right? And even some more harassing and misogynistic bullshit that they've experienced. But they've now created this armor, this crust of armor over them that creates this jadedness to openness to new experience. And so this is a good exercise. I used to believe blank, but now I know blank. And reframe it in a way where you can still protect yourself, but still be open to new experiences. It's a powerful exercise. And then, of course, and I've kind of peppered this throughout, but therapy and coaching, getting support from professionals who are trained to guide you through emotional reprocessing and identity rebuilding. I'm a fan of, if you're going to do therapy, obviously do it with a licensed clinician. That's kind of a no-brainer. If you're going to do coaching for these things, I'm a fan of work through either a certified coach or work through a clinically informed coach, a clinician that is now doing coaching. We all have life experiences, but just because I had a life experience doesn't mean I could turn around and be a good coach on those things. So again, with coaching, I gravitate towards clinically informed coaches. Of course, I'm not unbiased because that's what I am, or at least somebody that went through coaching and got certification in a coaching methodology. All right, let's wrap this up. Some closing reflections. Here's really what I want you to remember. You are not broken. You are not behind. I don't give a shit if I got separated at age 54. Think about that. That's a long grind, right? I wasn't 40. I wasn't 35. There was deep sense, and I do this crap for a living. There was a deep sense of, God, I'm restarting so late. It's so difficult. And yet, 2.5 years later, I found my person. I'm understandably going to spend the rest of my life with her. I never thought I would get married again. And here I am at the precipice of that choice. All of these things are in motion. And I never thought it would happen because I thought it was too late. You are not behind. And third, you are not unlovable. What you are is you are becoming and you are growing. And it's critical to keep that front of mind throughout the process. There is life after heartbreak, and there is clarity after confusion, and there is power in vulnerability. You see, the version of you that came after the ending, that version might just be the most real, resilient, and thriving version that you've known yet. So next week, we're going to conclude this series by talking about co-parenting, high conflict communication, and how to build a sustainable new normal. Next week is going to tie a bow on this entire 4-part series. You're not going to want to miss it. Until then, stay kind to yourself. And remember, this isn't a detour, it's a new path. And remember, insight without action changes nothing. If you're ready to turn awareness into movement and stress into strategy, coaching can be the catalyst. Coaching will change you. Reach out to set up a free consultation. You can find me at www.theunstressedexec.com or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as The Unstressed Exec. Let's create real momentum, starting now. Until next time, I'm Dr. George Vergolias, The Unstressed Exec. Thanks for listening. See you next time. And remember, shift happens.